Have you ever felt like your life has no meaning? Have you ever wondered why things happen that you just can't understand? Before we begin this story that might change the way you see life, I invite you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because here we share stories that fill the soul and renew faith. Now then, listen closely, because just like our main character, you might discover that with God, everything has a purpose. The wind was blowing hard that morning. Sofia, a young nurse, walked briskly toward the hospital where she worked. She was only 24 years old, but she carried an immense sorrow in her heart. She had just lost her mother, her best friend and greatest support. Every step felt like a battle. Why, God? Why did you take away the one I loved the most? She whispered, as tears threatened to fall. That question seemed to have no answer. Her whole life had fallen apart. Everything. When she arrived at the emergency room, a boy no older than 7 looked at her from a stretcher. His eyes were big and sad, yet he smiled in a way that broke her soul. "Hi, miss," the boy said. "Do you think all the bad things that happen for a reason?" Sofia froze. It was as if the child had read her heart. And at that moment, without knowing it, an invisible thread began to weave. A thread of a much greater purpose. Have you ever felt like someone, without even knowing it, speaks directly to your soul? Let me tell you what happened next. And remember, if this message is already touching your heart, subscribe so you won't miss more stories that God might be using to speak to you. Sofia approached the little boy with a faint smile. She knelt down beside him, took his hand, and asked, "What's your name, champ?" "Benjamin," he replied with that innocent sweetness only children have. "My arm hurts a lot, but my grandma says God never makes mistakes, that everything that happens, even if it hurts, has a purpose." Sofia felt a lump in her throat. Benjamin had just lost his parents in an accident, and yet he still trusted. "You know something, Sofia?" he said, as if he knew her name without being told. "Sometimes, God allows us to lose something, so we can find something greater." Sofia's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She didn't know whether to cry, hug him, or fall to her knees. How could a child, in the midst of his own pain, teach her so much? That day, something inside her began to heal. Not everything was lost. Maybe, just maybe, her pain had a purpose too. Sometimes, God speaks to us in the most unexpected moments. Has it ever happened to you? So, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to keep receiving these signs of love that nourish the soul. Days went by, and Sofia began visiting Benjamin whenever she could. Between treatments and healing sessions, they shared laughter, secrets, and also tears. Despite his pain, Benjamin radiated a light that was impossible to ignore. Every word he spoke was like a balm for Sofia's invisible wounds. One afternoon, while they were drawing on makeshift sheets in the waiting room, Benjamin asked her, "Do you miss someone too, Sofia?" She lowered her gaze, feeling the heavy weight of sadness in her chest. With a trembling voice, she replied, "Yes, I miss my mom a lot. She was my best friend, and now I feel very alone." Benjamin smiled, that sweet smile only children who've known pain can give. "You're not alone," he said, gently touching her hand. "God is preparing you for something beautiful. You just can't see it yet." Those words pierced Sofia's heart like a ray of light breaking through the darkness. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope. She didn't understand everything she was going through, but she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, her pain had a greater purpose beyond herself. The love of a child, faith in the midst of pain, God's whisper through the unexpected. It was all beginning to make sense. Who has been an angel in your life? Write it in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, Do it now, because every story here is a spark of faith for your life. Days went by, and Sofia had become Benjamin's favorite visitor. The emergency room, once cold and painful, now seemed like a place full of hope whenever they were together. One rainy afternoon, as the sky wept over the city, the head doctor approached Sofia with a grave expression. "Sofia, I need to talk to you." He pulled her aside, away from curious eyes. With a quiet voice, almost a whisper, the doctor revealed, "Benjamin's diagnosis is complicated. There's a real possibility he might not make it through this battle." Sofia felt the world collapse around her. She couldn't lose him, not him too. She ran to the hospital chapel, that small, forgotten room at the end of the hallway. She fell to her knees at the altar, tears flowing uncontrollably. "Lord," she cried, her soul torn open, "please don't let me lose him. Not after everything you've shown me through him. I beg you, don't take him." Silence filled the chapel, a silence so deep, Sofia could almost hear the beating of her own heart. And in the midst of that silence, deep within her spirit, a gentle and loving voice seemed to whisper, "Trust, even when you don't understand. Everything has a purpose." With a broken heart but a flicker of faith being reborn, Sofia stood up. She decided that, no matter what happened, she would walk with Benjamin through it all, with all the love she had. Because now, she understood something she couldn't see before. True love doesn't always change the outcome, but it does change hearts. When everything seems lost, that's when God works in silence. Have you ever witnessed a miracle in your life? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because every story here is living proof that God still works miracles. Sofia returned to Benjamin's room with a new determination in her eyes. She didn't know what would happen, but she knew that every second with him was a gift. "Hey, champ," she said, forcing a smile as she sat beside his bed. Benjamin, weak but still smiling, asked her, "Did you cry?" She laughed through her tears. "Yes, but sometimes crying cleanses the heart." He looked at her closely, as if he could see beyond her words. "Don't be afraid," the boy whispered. "I talked to God too, and he told me everything will be okay." Sofia felt a chill run down her spine. How could someone so small, so fragile, have such enormous faith? That night, against all odds, Benjamin's condition worsened. Doctors came and went, moving urgently in and out of the room. Sofia, even though it wasn't her shift, stayed by his side, silently praying and holding his little hand. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to peek through the windows. His life hung by a thread, and then, just when the doctors seemed to give up, Benjamin opened his eyes. He smiled. "Told you, Sofia, God has a purpose." The doctors couldn't explain it. It was medically impossible for him to survive in his condition. But there he was, alive. Sofia burst into joyful sobs, hugging the little boy as if the entire world depended on that embrace. And in that moment, she understood. We don't always have to understand God's ways. We just have to trust them. When everything seems lost, that's when God works in silence. Have you ever seen a miracle in your life? Tell me in the comments. And remember to subscribe, because every story here is living proof that God still works miracles. Sofia returned to Benjamin's room with a new determination in her eyes. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she knew that every second with him was a gift. "Hey, champ," she said, forcing a smile as she sat next to his bed. Benjamin, weak but smiling, asked, "Did you cry?" She laughed through her tears. "Yes, but sometimes crying cleanses the heart." He looked at her intently, as if he could see right through her words. "Don't be afraid," the boy whispered. "I talked to God too, and he told me everything's going to be okay." Sofia felt a chill run down her spine. How could someone so small, so fragile, have such enormous faith? That night, against all odds, Benjamin's condition worsened. Doctors came and went, moving urgently around the room. Sofia, even though it wasn't her shift, stayed by his side, praying silently, holding the boy's small hand. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to shine through the windows. His life hung by a thread. And then, just as the doctors seemed ready to give up, Benjamin opened his eyes. He smiled. "I told you, Sofia, God has a purpose." The doctors couldn't explain it. It was medically impossible for him to survive in that condition. But there he was, alive. Sofia let out a sob of joy, hugging the little boy as if the whole world depended on that embrace. And in that moment, she understood. We don't always have to understand God's ways. We just have to trust them. When God reveals his purpose in your life, you can't remain the same. Are you ready to say yes to what God wants to do with you? If this message touches your heart, subscribe and help share this testimony of hope. Months passed. Benjamin was discharged from the hospital, becoming a little living testimony of the power of faith. But Sofia didn't return to her old life. Something in her had changed forever. Inspired by her experience, she decided to establish a small support center for sick children and orphans. She called it Wings of Hope. Every child who arrived, every desperate mother who knocked on the door, found in Sofia a sincere hug, a word of faith, a light in the midst of their night. And sometimes, among the laughter and games, Sofia could see Benjamin running through the halls, healthy, happy, a living reminder that everything she had suffered had an eternal purpose. Dear friend listening to me, maybe today you don't understand your pain. Maybe your heart is broken into 1,000 pieces. But believe me, in God, everything has a purpose. Don't give up now. Your story isn't over yet. Now that you've made it this far, take a deep breath, because it was no accident that you heard this story. God is speaking to you, and if you feel that lump in your throat, that emotion in your chest, it's because he wants to remind you that none of what you've lived has been in vain. Years later, Sofia wrote in her journal, "I lost my child, and I thought it was all over. But God didn't abandon me. He showed me that my pain was the seed of a bigger mission, to comfort, embrace, and heal those who, like me, have once lost hope." Benjamin, now a teenager, became a volunteer at the center that gave him new life. He too wanted to give back what he had received: faith, love, and purpose. And you, yes, you who are watching this, you are not alone. No matter how broken you feel, no matter how much pain you've carried, God can use it all for good. Don't give up. Don't stop. Subscribe now if you want to receive more stories that heal, restore, and remind you that faith is still alive. And leave me a comment saying, "God, I accept your purpose in my life, because this is the beginning of something beautiful for you."